I gotta move over this way.
Yeah, there you go. You're centered. All right, I think we're live now. How you doing?
I'm doing good, my son.
I think you're a little early on the Christmas garb.
You know what? I am so sick of seeing 1.5 million hits for a puppy.
Oh yeah.
So we have something more important and joyful to say than a puppy. So we're going to title this, at least on my end.
Yeah.
And then
may have a cat next week.
Dad is in the background. He's going to have a live cat, and I'll just hold it.
Just
so, this will be a man with his reindeer and his elves shares deep truths from the North Pole about isms.
Okay.
It's going to be a man. Where'd he go? With this puppy.
Yeah.
That sharing happily about isms.
So just to clarify, we're going to get 500,000 hits because it's you and your puppy, which is a stuffed animal.
That's right. Well, it comes alive at night. And then
I think if that doesn't do it, the reindeer hat that's worth at least 250,000 views right there.
That is. I mean, I hit my reindeer flying under a tree. I hit one of my antlers. But then a man juggling with his son the issues of life.
Juggling the issues of life.
Yeah.
I just talk about different political philosophy, theoretical stuff while you juggle with reindeer hats. Yeah. I like it.
Yes, it is. Yes, and we deal with these philosophical questions.
Oh, what's that?
I got that. And
I bought it for you.
Well, Danny bought it for
me. Oh, yeah?
Yeah, Fedora.
Who's it written by?
Dostoevsky. Well, it actually has different, it has.
Wait, you have Dostoevsky?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, there's really good, so it talks about, problems of evil, mysticism, religious experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's pretty comprehensive. So
that's cool.
Yeah. And so then it has different, Thomas Hobbes and then Hussein Tazou.
I don't know who that is.
Huh?
I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Well, that person that probably said their name wrong. So I'm looking forward to tonight. I feel like it's going to have, something. I'm really looking forward to it. So
cool. Well, thank you for everybody who's streaming with us right now and who's been following us for the last few series that we were doing here. The last few videos that we've been doing are just about a father and a son who have different perspectives on the world, different worldviews, and different groups that they're associated with, but agree on one important point that all humans have dignity and value, and that's worth fighting for. And so we've been having good faith conversations where the goal is to learn more about each other, to learn more about the worlds that we kind of both represent, and try to bring wisdom and clarity, and if nothing else, get millions of views because of reindeer hats and dogs. That's the ultimate goal.
Puppies. Yeah.
Just involve as many puppies as possible.
That's the goal. I would add, there's some things you get really excited about because it lends itself to authenticity, and really, I would just add, the good faith, and what you said before that, just, that as a father and son, as friends and people that enjoy each other, that there's just a beauty I feel in learning from one another. And, I've had issues in my life that I've hit the wall on, so I need more understanding because I know when it's unnecessary. And so, just when you were young, you'd always bring me a lot of understanding, good questions to ask, real good. And so, I just really get off the calls and just feel awakened in my heart. I know that's a term that has some connotations to people, but maybe it's right. Yeah. So that's very good. I mean, not many people get the opportunity to have real authentic discussion and, and really ask tough questions of one another that are more aimed towards growing together. And so not the gotcha approach. So that's
well, and I think that's one of the significant things that we talked about in our last video. It's just the recognizing too that we is on a few different levels, like the you and I, the right and the left, and just like citizens of the United States, like whether on different sides of the political divide, like we need each other. And even if we don't agree on a lot of things, we were talking too about like how it often is maybe we don't disagree on as many things as we think we do, and trying to find, that common ground is really important. And so we're kind of continuing that discussion today. We were talking about, and this is something that we talked over the weekend. You and I talked over the weekend about this, that this is something that I've been really thinking about recently, and how important it is to not dismiss people because of their isms. And that's the title of the video, is talking about this. And so we'll kind of get into what that means and everything like that. For people who are asking whether or not the red antlers are significant, no, they are not. But they're also not insignificant either. So
I believe they represent a Christmas, that we're in a time where every day is like Christmas. It's a great adventure, and tonight we're going to have great adventure and discoveries that'll be gifts.
Perfect segue. Love it.
Then the dog is a man with this dog that gets $1.5 million.
Oh, right. Yeah. So, okay, so you wanna get going?
Yeah, I do. I have some notes I wrote earlier, but I think that this is a topic and that I'd really like to get your perspective on, just your definition and the pros and the cons, if that applies, and how it affects us today. You don't have to answer all that, but I think that.
Yeah, well, so part of the reason that this was the topic that I wanted to talk about today was because we've been discussing, like we were talking about feminism, and having a discussion about what that means and what does it mean to be a feminist, whether, and explaining kind of my viewpoints on that, and then if your perspective on that. But before before we wanted to talk about particular like feminism, I think that it's important to also have a discussion about how quickly I think in our contemporary society we can be comfortable recognizing other people because of the either whether it's political ideology or economic perspectives or something like that. We can tend to bracket people, put them in categories, and a lot of these isms, whether it's feminism or socialism or capitalism or whatever,
racism, sexism,
and different racism, sexism, classism. There's ways in which we can see someone being we can put a label on them and describe them, think that we have understanding of them, and also like these are all in all of these different scenarios, whether it's racism, whether it's feminism, whether it's capitalism, they're all very specific conversations that, they're conversations that have specific branches to them, so they can be really broad. Oftentimes, I feel like I've had conversations with people, and this is, when I was a Christian and was wanting to describe, my religion to other people. There often is just people can associate you if you say something like I'm a Christian or I'm a feminist or I'm a capitalist or something like that. There's people can be really quick to associate that with particular beliefs and either dismiss you, or sometimes we do this in-group out-group thing based on people's different belief systems. And oftentimes it just is, we have to recognize that we don't really know a lot about what that means, because it can mean a lot of different things to different people. Like if we're talking about Christianity, and I know that you and I have both felt this in the past, and this is a point of similarity, is when you talk about your identity as being a Christian, so many people can believe so many different things. I mean, if we're in a different country and we're talking to people in, Norway or something like that, they're going to associate it with something entirely different. If you're in the South, they're going to associate it with different. Based on your race, people are going to associate what that means differently. And that can be really problematic, because a lot of times it can be, people will think that they have you pegged or think that they understand you, because of this belief system that you subscribe to. And a lot of times it's inaccurate, or worse. I think that what we do is we will label people, we'll see particular stereotypes or whatnot, and people, and then we will put the ism on top of them, whether that's, calling some, saying someone's a racist or saying someone's like a communist or something like that. I think oftentimes we're quick to throw out those terms without understanding the implications of what those terms really mean. So do you want to hop in here, or you want me to keep going?
No, I think it's, I'd like to, you do a great job at defining, the term, that it's a laundry list of stereotypes. And
yeah.
I was just looking at the isms.
Yeah.
And there's hundreds of them.
Right. Well, yeah. In philosophy, like kind of what brought this up for me is like in philosophy, the more you study philosophy, the more you have all of these different isms. It's kind of like within, if you're studying theology, all these, whether it's Calvinism or like different sects of Christian belief, and it branches so much where you then get to the point where you're like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to believe. I don't know. Like I'm a Protestant, I think, you don't even have an understanding of what all these terms and categories mean. But sorry, keep going.
Well, a question I'd get to later, I have a few examples. Just you define by example, but you also define, as you did there, more as by definition of, just using words to identify, concrete words to identify. And, I've learned best by, what I taste, touch, smell, and feel, as well as the concept.
Mm-hmm.
But I experienced Christianism.
Yeah.
Where after I got saved,
I
had my wrestling buddies that I'm the same guy.
Yeah.
I had a different heart for. I fell in love with somebody, Jesus. I came back, but their treatment of me was Jesus freak, the Christianism. And so they saw me labeled, and it took a good 6 months just to be with them every day and night to see, that I had the same heart and the same desire and same love for them. And there was another time where I and Winky Pratney, you remember Winky, I believe, but But we would go to these Ivy League schools. They would come together after they would graduate, and they're going out into the world, and they're asking, they're having different speakers come, and just our orientation was a worldview that was more Hebrew and integrated with the God of all life. And so I, made the mistake to keep the microphone on, but I was speaking because they were laughing at Winky. They were and they had decided that, again, this term of Christianism that, and I just confided in the men that were to kind of usher me in and out, if they just give us a chance. And I talked about, that my upbringing had been where I'd been fast tracked in the university, and I had good grades and graduated, the outstanding graduate, but led the Supreme Court. And so I was aware of their intellectualism.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't counter intellectualism. And, but I'm having this discussion with these men with my heart, and I'm saying this is the ism that they believe I am part of. And I said, if they just give me a chance and we have a real dialogue, it might not be they buy but at least we have fair, give and take. And so I went down to find some of the points and of this is what I believe about the world to them, and this is what I believe will help benefit the world. And, and it isn't putting big religion and rules on, the others. And this is, and it was, so I had some unction, caring, clarity. But when I walked out, they had been quiet, and they stood and clapped. And it was just, the ism got broken down. And it was, a profound time, because a number of them said they had made assumptions. And if that wouldn't have happened, then the assumptions wouldn't have been made. And so, but lately, I've had a few times where my whiteism has been hated. Really, I've had people go after me about being a middle-aged white man.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that it's important to be a little bit careful about our language here, because I think that there is a difference between prejudice of identity, or so like talking about but belief systems is like, so with isms we're talking about beliefs, not necessarily just like identity. So if someone's being prejudicial towards you or towards anybody else because of their gender, I think that's a little bit of a different discussion, and I think that it'd be interesting to talk about that. But
you don't think that whiteism is like racism or blackism?
Well, so when racism, like the term racism, is a term that's used to define when particular, again, that's something like it's a layered conversation. But when you're calling someone a racist, you're saying that they ascribe to a particular belief system in which they value one race above another race, right? And I think that then there's like more refined conversations of like, what does racism in the United States mean, and like what is racism on a macro level instead of a micro level. Like a lot of people will have conversations about racism in the United States specifically being about the oppression of minorities. And so like it wouldn't be when people talk about like reverse racism and stuff like that, there's sometimes a confusion of categories, like a confusion of definitions and topics. And so yeah, I would be careful not to associate those two as the same thing, because here's the issue with when you are prejudiced against someone because of a belief system that they have. Sometimes it's not prejudice. Sometimes there's like if I'm if someone's a fascist or like a fascism and believes a particular belief that like white nationalism or something like that, where it's like the Aryan race is superior to other. Sorry. Siri was helping define what racism was.
I find her helpful.
Yeah. So like white nationalism or something like that. It would be like, and if it was based on the belief that the Aryan race is superior to other races and that ought to be valued higher than other races, you can be like, well, yeah, I have a problem with that belief system. And so I think that it's important to have a difference of distinction and categories, because I do think that prejudice based off of pure skin color or gender or whatnot is wrong and is a different discussion, because then I think that we can have a conversation of like the way that gender and racial prejudice affects the United States. But going back to just the belief systems, it's about not feeling like because you like say someone like when you were, I think the example that you were talking about, Christianism or like evangelicalism, we could say, if thinking that you understand all of the things, like I have several critiques in my, of evangelical beliefs, but that doesn't, it's not associating the person's identity with their belief system, because we talked about this a couple weeks back, but it's like a problem of calling someone a racist, because if you label it as their identity, well, then they don't have a capacity to change in your mind. Like if someone's racially prejudiced, that's obviously off the table. Like that's really terrible if someone's has racist beliefs. But then there's a danger to labeling someone a racist, because then that becomes their whole identity. And so instead you can be like, point out the particular beliefs and address the particular beliefs and be like, okay, well, there's capacity to change. You believe this thing, but like, here's the truth about this situation. Here's why that belief system is destructive. This is why that belief system is harmful to other people. Here's why that belief system is rooted in false information and all that sort of things. And you can actually talk about the particular belief without attacking the individual themselves. Do you get the distinction that I'm going there for? Or am I...
Oh, well, yeah, I do. I think that in this instance, you remember when I got popped in the airport?
Yeah.
I cut that guy off, and he popped me, and he was from a different culture, big man, and he said things about me. One, I cut him off, so but he went down his belief system about white privileged people, and after he popped me, so, and then the rest of the ones around there were not necessarily, they're all of the same group, and and so they were agreeing until I spoke up, and I said, now, let me tell you who I am as an individual, and I was pretty strong about it, and because it was not helpful, it wasn't true, it wasn't I was just a dummy, but it was called dummism, not whiteism. But so I do believe that the association of beliefs did come with the classification of who I was. And so if it's an ism that's starting to grow, we have a culturalism about, blacks, about Hispanics, because then, I see it in the same category, but
well, I don't mean to diminish one or the other. It's just about, I think that we ought to be able to critique each other's belief systems, don't you think? And so I don't think that we ought to be able to critique each other's racial identity or gender identity or whatnot. On the surface level, I think that you and I totally agree. Like if if someone is white and they're punched by someone else and someone was, well, first of all, you just should not be assaulting people regardless. Like that's A, but because like causing physical harm to someone else because of their racial identity is, regardless of what that racial identity is obviously
hurt his hand more than it hurt my head.
Yeah, well, you've been known to have a hard head, so that makes
right. Poor guy.
Yeah,
knock below the big knobber behind my ear kind of got me woke up for the day. So
well, and even there's situations like, let's say, and I'm not saying that this was the case, but let's say that you had done something, or not even. Let's take it out of the scenario in which it's you, but someone,
Siri loves you.
It really thinks I'm talking to her. I think that there's an importance to being able to identify and critique people's belief systems without appealing to those isms, right? So instead of when someone has a belief system in which they are racially prejudiced because of whatever, but this race is better than this race, or a lot, and some of this can be just even about stereotypes or something like that, like this particular race is better at X or Y or something like that. Again, I think that it's really, really important in these conversations to critique the belief and not just label the belief system, right? So if, and I feel like this happens a lot, is there's sometimes interacting with people, and it's not just people on the left or right, it just universally, I think that, and even within myself, and I certainly had prejudices that I grew up with that I didn't realize and had to, really reconcile with those things. But if you're wanting to have a conversation with someone, you think someone crossed the line who said something that reflects a belief system that you disagree with, I think that it's just really important to get good at articulating and talking about the particular belief and why those beliefs are problematic. Because if you want change to happen, that's what's necessary. You can't look at someone, and even if they do have a whole lot of racist beliefs, you can't just call them a racist and then expect that to change the person, because they're not going to know the first step in rectifying those things. They're going to say, of course, I'm not a racist, like that, or they'll be like, sure, I am a racist, and I just think that this race is better, and that's a problem, right. But that's why it's really important to critique it. So if I have problems with particular aspects of capitalism, but I'm not going to label people as capitalists and then be like, well, this capitalist this white capitalist male, let's dismiss them because of that, because of course that doesn't get us anywhere. And it's like, almost certainly I'm missing something in that interchange. Like there's something about them. Like I do not have a full understanding of that belief system, like what capitalism all entails, what it entails for the particular individual. And so just getting good at like actually trying to establish what it is that we disagree with, instead of just marking and labeling people as different, and then having these sort of like ideological battles that just will never result in any clarity.
And I concur with what I hear you saying, is that the way to growth in this context is identifying those things that we need to be progressive about, would be the word. But progressive in our understanding. I think that my thought or appeal or approach would be, at my primary foundation is I'm going to look to God, and I'm going to say to, what I believe that Scripture, like our discussion today. Somebody you knew that was saying, hey, it's all right to kick a puppy or something.
Well,
I would
should I
say
frame that?
Proverbs, that it's, be kind to your beast. Well, this is where I think the approach to me is so important, because I was in so many debates as we're getting more and more the gotcha, the intellectual battle versus to me, there's a half our brain has been dead, in that sense of that rational part of us, but then also that knowing that comes from wisdom, from the heart of God, I would say, it's beautiful. And it's, so I would submit this, that when I began to appreciate, when I sat with many people and I didn't understand their beliefs, like the bad ones, we met in Israel, and there were values that that were tough to concur with, the particular group of bad ones, and so to have a conversation with appreciation versus critique right up front, and then to have the greatest way of love is to listen to somebody's heart. And I have found that within even family, that there can be assumptions and not the time to take to listen to one another's heart. And that to me is something that I want to come more with appreciation, so that I, like you said, and then it leads to growth. Not as much critique to me as, I'm not saying critique's the most evil word, but would you consider a higher way? And
well, and having those critiques mean something. Well, and that's kind of what I feel like I'm trying to get at, is that if you do, there are plenty of reasons to critique. Like I'm not of the belief that everything's relative and that there isn't truth and we all choose our truth. Like I'm certainly not of that belief. I believe that there is wrong and there's right, and that some belief systems are wrong, or not even belief systems, but particular beliefs are false beliefs. They are on wrong information or have wrong values or whatnot. But the problem that I'm trying to address here is not accepting all belief systems and accepting everybody else's values, but being able to like learn how to have accurate and meaningful critiques of other people's beliefs, and knowing when to say I'm out of my league, like when I just don't know, like I remember a lot of arguments that I've had on both sides about economic, really nuanced economic policies in politics. Like I remember when I was in, I did speech and debate when I was in high school, and really felt a lot of pride in having an opinion and being able to defend my opinion, and thought I knew a lot about economics. And I didn't know a lot about economics. Still don't really, because it's complex, and because it's an entire field of study where I can know a little bit of things and like have some information there. But like the more and more I've learned about economics is the more and more I've realized I don't really know anything about it. And that's what I think, if we had a certain level of humility in the way that we do, and I'm saying this myself, like, I think that this is probably the biggest thing that I have had to and continue to have to learn as I grow older, is how to just not have opinions on things that I don't really know about. And like being able to recognize when I don't know a whole lot about a particular field of study, or belief systems, so another good example is when I went to India. I'm a young Christian minister preaching the gospel in India. And I knew some things about Christianity and was confident and like feel good about like speaking about my own convictions. But then I was talking to Buddhist monks and trying to critique their belief systems, and just didn't know a thing about them. Just didn't know anything about what Buddhism meant, and would keep having conversations with Buddhist monks. I mean, it's not like they were casual in their belief systems. And I'm not even saying it to the point where, that means they were right and I was wrong, or that I was right and they were wrong. It was just more of a sense in which, like, if we don't learn what other people actually believe, we really won't be able to accurately critique them. And most importantly, we won't know when we're just way off base, like when we just don't get it.
Okay. Excellent. And I do believe, the world that I have run in the last, 30 years has been the evangelical, charismatic.
Yeah.
And I felt, that there was, I'm not saying that I didn't see my wrestling buddies or my business buddies, women and political, world that I walked in, but maybe even a little more, I would see this opinion in every area, because it's your everything. It's your God,
right?
It's your culture, it's your community. And so when there wasn't a lot of tolerance, and so when you walked away from somebody that said there's not apocalyptic devastation, doesn't have to be, you can really create wealth, and then you're called greedy business people. I can remember 6:30 a.m. prayer meeting Bob Fraser and I led, and we'd pray for the business people. It's tough to make out there in the marketplace, and a lot of them had chose to be benevolent. I'm not saying everybody, but and so people would get up and just say those carnal business people.
Yeah.
Danny Paul's funny. He's got
whipped cream or something. That sounded like a
head banging music on, and then he dumps his Coke all over.
It's all good.
He in an hour he ruined the garbage disposal. No.
Hey, I had Siri talking to me too. That's all good.
We're having the aliens. We're getting on a different frequency here.
Well,
just say. Say, and so I'm critiquing, but I'm able to critique with some understanding in that realm, because I found myself, like Y2K. I was just so sure it was devastation. And so I'm having this debate with this national minister, and I'm telling him how off he is, and he's half-hearted, lukewarm, because he's not getting prepared. But so I don't mind looking at that and saying, looking at a lot of things and saying our acceptance of people, going through a divorce, going through, people didn't understand it. I didn't understand it. I never spoke on divorce. I never expected it, and I love Mom, but there can be 7 different layers of reasons why people grow apart.
Right.
And, I had to be a 3-headed monster, and somebody else had to.
Yeah.
And I'm not justifying. I think, I didn't care for her heart. I made mistakes, but in the way that was necessary. But to have the scarlet A from something real close, because they hooked their wagon on the ministry I was doing, and it was not going to go as well. But my reaction was horrible. I just got hurt and reacted. I just thought, this is a different world I'm seeing behind the curtain, that that there are weaknesses. And then I had a decision to get offended, or I have made a choice, that blessed is he who doesn't get offended at what he does or he doesn't do, God, that, that's just life. And I had probably done the same thing to other people, but I became aware that I'm not part of a very tolerant group or a very understanding group. But I realized that, Jesus called the sick, and it's ones that hurt, and they react, and they protect, and they defend. So now I've met amazing people as well. I'm not here to put that down.
Yeah.
I became aware, and I think, you become being a professor for 4 years, I became aware of some intellectual pride. I had a department of 66 professors, and the isms were about the students were unbelievable, and just the rural isms about people that weren't smart because they were from the rural. Because we were losing students.
Plebeians.
Huh?
Nothing. It's just it's a term in like plebeian, like lower intellectually. Base. Yeah. I that's part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this today, is because like I have some real convictions that spread towards the academia that I'm with. Like I love my department, and I love studying philosophy, and I love that this what I'm doing, and environmental ethics and everything like that. But it is a real reality that is pervasive everywhere that I've been, is this sense in which getting like really quick to dismiss people based off of belief systems that you really don't even understand. Even people who are paid to be academics, like people who are paid to study, so much, I would say 9 out of 10 philosophical conversations, some philosophers would disagree with me on this, but like it feels like 9 out of 10 of them are just people talking past each other and trying to sound smart. And I just get tired of it, and I don't want to get caught up in it myself. And I think it's particularly dangerous then when we're having politics that are based off of these beliefs that if we're just talking past each other, can we get to the point where we're like caring about the widows and the orphans, or we're caring about the disenfranchised, or we're just caring about meaningful work, meaningful labor, or we're talking about equity and talking about, like, instead of having these conversations and just being like, well, he's a dirty capitalist, so let's dismiss what he believes, or she's a feminist Marxist, so let's dismiss what she believes. And a lot of times very few people actually know what those things mean, like what capitalism all entails. Like, it's incredibly complex belief system, and there's multitudes of different people. And people will critique like capitalism and not be able to, communism and not be able to distinguish between communism and then socialism and then Marxist-Leninists and Marxist Engels and like Marxist, like these different, and it's a really complicated belief system. And I'm not saying it's right or, I'm not coming in defense of any belief system in particularly right now, but just the way in which people are so quick to dismiss people because of belief systems that they don't really understand,
No, I think I was called the poor fundamentalist.
Yeah.
And so I was there, and they were talking about how students were leaving. And they were just, honestly, human beings are human beings, and there was some insecurity.
Yeah.
Like, we had a interviewing teacher that had never been on an interview, and we had a speech teacher that never had given a speech. So I took him out. This was in college because he gave me a B on this, and I said, I've done this a few times because I already started a business. So man, I got it handed to him, and then I was proud of them. They didn't give up. They kept interviewing, and this man learned how to interview, and and I was proud of him. And the other one was learned how to give a good speech and got Toastmasters and really. So and they were excited that I believed in them and that they could make it work out there. So, but if I try to get a word out in a staff meeting, they would cut me short and pat me on the head and fundamentalists, and I kick my leg like a puppy, So, but I put a tape in their box and say, I said, can I just submit this to you? And I had 11 ways to lift learning, and they listened to it.
Yeah,
and they came back and they said, "Huh." And
it
was really beautiful, and I just think if we were able to get past the isms, and see the person, have more of a conversation with them, because I can tell somebody's really got something in there that's deep and true. Like, I've had dreams of Nancy Pelosi when she was 6 and 8, 10, and how she really got touched by, she felt God as a Catholic girl, and then she took off with that mission, but didn't check in very often with God after that. Now, I'm not saying I'm defining reality. But then I have it about Hillary Clinton, which is really, she's been, not looked at as a favorable figure at all. And,
well, in your circle, that's the case. Yeah.
And I hear, not a,
well, weirdly in my circle, she's not either, because a lot of my circle is far left, where it's a lot of critique of and so that's where it gets a little bit tiring sometimes, and that's why it's also about, let's just look at belief systems. Let's talk about, or not belief systems, let's talk about particular beliefs, right? And like you said, I think that a lot of people, if we're talking about justice or something like that, I would so much rather have a conversation with someone who is very different, than me, a fundamentalist or something, like someone who's really conservative, and having a conversation about justice. Because if it's a conversation specifically about justice, then it is about whether or not Democrats or Republicans are better in these realms. That it just gets messy quickly. And instead, if we're talking about what does it mean? To hold people accountable, or what does it mean to have society built to be just, or you and I were talking over the phone about social mobility, like the idea of being able to work and provide, like if you're in the lower class, how much does your nation provide you with opportunity to work so that you could go from lower class to middle class or upper class, like, and that being a valuable metric of a society, being able to be like, well, like, if you create meaningful work, like, to be rewarded for it. And it's like, if we're having that conversation, we can have a so much more productive conversation, because if we disagree, at least we're knowing what we're disagreeing about, rather than just saying poor fundamentalists. And I mean, I don't with some of the classes that I have, like, there will be students who are wrong about particular
definitions, facts.
Definitions, yeah, like, think that subjectivism means this thing, or thinks, and whatnot. And if I just dismiss them and say that they're wrong, well, I've failed as an educator to provide them with the steps of, like, actually talking about, well, here's where it's wrong. And maybe also, like, a lot of times maybe I'll be like, oh, well, you're wrong about this, but maybe they had an insight that I missed along the way and was like, oh, well, we typically have talked about this issue in this way, and I thought you were wrong about definition, and maybe you were mixing some words, but your philosophical insight here is really good and poignant, and so you miss all of this opportunity to have constructive conversations when you quickly just look at someone's belief system and throw the baby out with the bathwater,
or perceived belief system.
Yeah, perceived beliefs, and that's a really key thing. Is like, we're just not experts. Not everybody's an expert in religion. Not everybody's an expert in politics, or like economics, and it's hard because we're supposed to vote on these things, and it is hard to be a good political human being right now, because so many of these things you have to kind of like be like, well, I don't know the fine dynamics of race relations and like the historical, like, everything that's gone on in the United States in regards to like racial history. Like, that's a huge thing for me to know. And sometimes it's a little bit unfair for, like, I feel like sometimes liberals, or academic liberals especially, people in my world can be way too demanding on, someone who's in rural Missouri is like, I don't have any idea what the history of the United States is in this particular, like, I went to, like, if I went to college or not, or like, it doesn't, I didn't have this wealth of knowledge in this place. So like, what, to be able to understand the nuance around some of these conversations is just a difficult thing to do. And so we have to have a little bit of understanding for our fellow human being, or like environmentalism. Like, I study environmental ethics and absolutely believe that there's a lot of things that we got to get better about. But I also know that, like, the farmer in Kansas is probably not going to have a whole lot of information sources and a lot of wealth of informations to explain to them, which particular behaviors are advantageous or not. And so you just have to be able to recognize that people don't have all the information, and be able to have that own epistemic humility to be like, I just don't know in this particular, and that's an okay position. I wish that it was more okay to say I don't know in our society. It's definitely not something that's rewarded, but I think it's the wisest thing to say oftentimes.
No, I concur, and that people generally, I believe, if they're not having a gun held to their head, that means being put on the defensive.
Right.
Are doing the best they can.
Yeah.
Like, I have a friend that's a huge pig farmer.
Yeah.
And he's instituted better and better methods,
Yeah.
But pig farming is pretty cruel, interestingly.
Yeah.
And so he's really wrestling with this as his family, his inheritance, and how does he make those changes where he can be seen as an enemy. And I believe also just I had one other thought. Just, like the athletes to me that are put in a place, your diaconate and your episcopate, your measure of rule and authority is you're an entertainer. You're not somebody that's spending hours upon hours looking at, there is something to be rewarded. Like for academics, if everybody gets an A and they become teachers of environmental philosophy, and you see, they don't know what they're doing. We need to reward experts, and that's what I've been looking through the last 50 years on YouTube, and just knowing like the Buckley debates, what William Buckley debates are very informative. And there's a number, and he was debating and I got to remember the man's name. He's black, but he lost a few times to him. It was really lost in the sense that they weren't attacking, they weren't, but the points were just well made, and they had heart, and they had earnestness, and they had experience, and they're very interesting people. That sense of history, and to see what people were really dealing with when they made these decisions. That's where I feel like, this is, and I'm about ready to take a nap, but I want to do part two. But
an 8-hour nap. I think that's called going to bed, but that sounds good.
And we are getting some great comments, and what I'd love to do is, get on sooner than later, because I was able to put up an iPad that gives me those comments, but this ability for you and I to look at, there's assumptions with parents and children, for example, and I did it with my parents, and I just, there is a place that I believe, why did you do what you did there, mom or dad? And, and to our child, why did you do, where you can just really keep the love and keep the isms out of the picture. Not the assumptions. And that's where I think a conversation leads us like this to believe, like I have found in the Christian community, part of the community I was in was very intolerant, and by that, to the values of God that were filled with mercy. One of the people that I'd love us to talk to is David Allshul, who's the Pope of Truce, they call him, but he just, in social care, he's a Democrat, and moral values, he's a Republican. And so we don't like with abortion or things like that,
or on particular, he doesn't. So it sounds to me like, because I see social and moral often being some of the similar things, but it sounds like maybe he doesn't fit on one line or the other.
Economics and the care for disadvantaged, social program. And he's lived there enough to know they need a helping hand, but he's all for more development programs that help people move forward. But he doesn't want to leave the elderly. I mean, we're headed towards a plight to the poor elderly that could really, really be sad. And so, I look at this as an opportunity over these next years to really have a foundation where we're able to speak freely about we come to agreement on just the terms, and then what's the hope solution. And that's where I haven't seen enough, like them not necessarily debating. I want to see the presentation of ideas and how the solutions would work. I understand economics enough to know, that some of the things that are prescribed, are good ideas, but it's just who pays for it and how's it paid for. But then on on the racism. I don't say that I have as full understanding.
Yeah.
I'm seeing, blacks from both sides that are saying we don't want to be victimized, a welfare state. We want to be helped in a different way. And then we have others that are saying, we need the helping hand or whoever,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd be careful. Like, it's just, you got to be careful too with like statements like phrases like welfare states and stuff like that. Like, they're just so loaded. Like, all of these things have a lot of history and a lot of, and so I appreciate what you're saying. Like, I don't want to jump on you or something like that but with when we're talking about these dynamics of like how we want to be in a world where people can make meaningful lives, and that our society is equitable, and that, like, regardless of your race or your gender or your sexual orientation, that you can make a meaningful life for yourself. And I think that that's what most people would agree with. I mean, sexual orientation might be hard for some people, but we'll have that conversation some other time. But but just like to be able to have, like, look and say that, like, whether you're Republican or you're Democrat, I do think that a lot of the heart of it is like, I want to be able to make a meaningful life for myself. And so if you look at a group of people who have been marginalized throughout history, whether that's women or people of color, and like, hindsight is 2020, where we can look back. This is an exercise that I think that it's really good for people to always do, is look back and be like, okay, well, in the 1940s, was it the case that people of color and women were being marginalized, and that being able to, like, create meaning and live a meaningful life was much more difficult just based off of your gender and race? I mean, I feel like there would be very few people who would look back in the 1940s and be like, oh, well, yeah, that was an equitable society. And so when we look back, we can look then now to the present and be like, okay, well, things have changed, things have gotten better, but are we still there? Have we reached this point where, regardless of these, your skin color or your gender, that you're given opportunity and equal opportunity, and that's where it's, a conversation where, people are going to disagree. And I'm sure you and I will agree in a lot of respects. We might disagree on the level. Like, I'm pro reparations. Like, I believe that there's, like, a lot of things that I think are, that I would say, and I can just see in your eyeballs that
I'm saying, if you're going to pay for it, go ahead, man.
Sure. Just send me that inheritance, and then I'll do it. But I think that would be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, and I like those conversations. I just, and I'm going to have in this conversation the place of God. I'm going to say, okay, now we had freedom of religion and just the value of God having a voice. By that, the Pledge of Allegiance, or no, not the Pledge of Allegiance, but just in God we trust, in their nation.
Yeah.
That's historically why we set up this country, was religious freedoms. And so, to be able to,
I think
to not react to the name of Jesus and God, I mean, it's really tough in this world to, I mean, honestly, like, if I write on Facebook about use that name, I don't know what's happening, but I know it just doesn't get put up in my comments often. And I think that's,
if you talk about Jesus on Facebook.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing it like, kind way. I'm blessing somebody, I just say, so
I don't know what you're talking about specifically, but I think that's an interesting, so, like, where I'm I'm at, where, because I grew up Christian, and many of the people that I love and like still identify with like a lot of Christian values stuff. And so if it were the case that Christians were being persecuted or marginalized in the United States, like I would want that rectified, and I don't think that that's the case. I think that there is always dynamics where it's going to be, people will be prejudiced against you regardless of what you believe. Like, and people are certainly prejudiced against Christians in specific situations, and like in particular sects of academia, it's going to be hard for you or whatever. But I just, from my perspective, it's been way the other. Like I remember some, family members and stuff, not you and not like close immediate family members, but who, when I said that I was not a Christian, felt a lot more prejudiced than I ever felt being a Christian. And like I just think that, we just have to be. But I want to hear about that, because maybe I miss on some of those things. Maybe there are certain areas in which like being a Christian is, you can be marginalized in the United States. But regardless, if you are of the position of like, you can certainly identify that, like being, treated, because if you're like a white man and you feel like you're being dismissed, that feeling is horrible. Like that feeling is, you feel invalidated. You feel like, well, I have something of value and meaning, and I don't want my meaning to be relegated just because of what I look like or because of what religion that I have. Yeah. And so I would just turn that empathy towards the people who have historically always been disadvantaged. Yeah. And like, you can do both. You can still advocate for Christians
that's excellent.
But like, I think that you look and say, and that's what sometimes I just don't get of having conversations with people who are more conservative. It feels like so quickly to dismiss the plights of the poor and disenfranchised. And it seems like, I just don't know. I just don't understand that, And I think that what we want to do is like clearly make it a society in which everyone's treated, where they have the ability to create meaning and to be who they are, and that isn't relegated to just certain aspects of society because of their class or race or gender or whatnot. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I love the heart and the point. I found that at the university that there was more discussion about the poor and disenfranchised, but I found in the Christian world and the stats are that
there's some action.
There's a lot more action and generosity and benevolence. Yeah. But I wouldn't disagree with the sense of the poor because of their own making in some situations, and that I would be concerned about with the right, in certain situations, Yeah. So it definitely is looking at, having a better world and how do we walk this out. And I'd like, I think the only thing I'd say about Christians and giving them is that I feel like it's like you've met in the environmental world, you've really met some real wrongs that people are seeing. And like, I really met him, and so when somebody shifts their allegiance, it's like if somebody didn't like my dad.
Yeah.
It really hurts. I love my dad, I love him. And so I think, gosh, you don't know him, I mean, or I don't want to say that. I'll just, so much good about him, so beautiful. And the way we represented him might not be the best as believers, but that's what I'm listening to you about the environment, because I'd have friends that that would say, "Oh, that's not bad," or "That's not
right."
So I'll go and watch, like I watched, last week, an hour and a half long about, the meat industry, and I just came out not wanting to eat meat. I look at poor cattle, and I just think, now someone might respond to me and say that's, God created them that way. And I think there's progressive revelation. The lion will lay down with the lamb, it says one day, that we won't have, the predators. And I look forward to that day. I don't want to watch lions kill birds that are beautiful,
Yeah.
That's me. And I think,
Well, and there's, I mean, I really appreciate you like that. That's where it does feel like why we have these conversations. And two is like a fruitful sense of agreement of like, well, like we can, sometimes I don't understand, why we disagree so much. Not you and I, but like when it talks about like some of the most compassionate people I know are Christian people who, and especially when it comes to like if it's animal ethics or just ethics of caring for the widow or the orphan, like you said, like some of the best people that I know who've put things into practice, it's Kevin Casey's of the world or Calvin Camille, and people who are dedicating their lives to loving and serving other people. I've seen incredible things from the Christian world where they do that. I've also seen it like the person who I've first associated with that is like it's all of the intersections of weird things, but she's a vegan Marxist Christian. Like that's her. She's like but she like helped establish like the philosophy in prison program at UMKC, and like is just dedicated to being like, I have zero possessions. I'm giving it to everyone that I care about, and or like who needs it. Like the whole principle, like when like I think the passage of like if you have two coats, give one to the poor, like literally embodied in that. And so you have these mixes of people, and that's where I think that we get, like, I remember growing up and I remember people making jokes about Democrats and just thinking like that, just meeting that woman would have blown me away. Because I would have been like, wait, none of this computes. Like you're supposed to be selfish, just asking for me, like handouts and stuff like that. And then I was like, oh, this is clearly not the case. Not that there's some criticisms that, we can talk about which policies are better for groups of people and whatnot. But I just not to be blinded to the human compassion that is quite clearly evident in people who, are Marxists or are, evangelicals or, and so I think that's people aren't their belief systems that they prescribe to. Oftentimes they don't even really know what that means. So who cares anyway? Like it's like, we
got to understand sometimes it's like, I came in a Trotskyite, but but then when I found that some systems eliminated God, the state becomes ruler, and I lived in enough places where it just seemed like that. But we can talk about that, But it just was, it's a beautiful way to live. Acts 2:42. You share everything in common. You're making sure people are cared for.
Right.
And there is enough to go around.
Yeah. Well, and that's where like I could, say we land on whatever politics, whoever gets elected or whatever, if we were having a coherent conversation about, and, say you and I were just making the decisions of what policies we were going to enact, it'd be a crazy world.
That'd be kind of fun. Oh,
I'm not sure it would be better, but it would be different.
Everybody have ice cream. Everybody.
Universal ice cream would be the point where we both agree.
What else you need?
Marie Antoinette. Let them eat cake.
Give them cake.
give them ice cream. Yeah, no, but like say you and I were having legitimate discussion of which system best provides for the poor and the needy, and you're saying, hey, we should have a society that doesn't regulate these things, but then provide opportunity for the church to do these things, and which I'm not saying is particularly your position. And then I'm saying, okay, well, we need to have these universal systems in place that make sure, people are fed and have healthcare or something like that. If people ended up voting for your plan, at least it's in the place of like being like, okay, well, we both agreed though that it's good to take care of the poor. And so like now we can hold each other accountable for taking care of the poor, instead of me just trying to then sabotage your policies and you trying to sabotage my policies, being like, okay, well, we had disagreements of these policies. It ended up the democracy went in your direction, so we're going to go more in your plans. But the accountability is that like, all right, well, let's make sure that churches are taking care of the poor then. Like, I think that's a fair statement to say, is that like, okay, if you think that it's going to be the church, let's make sure the church is doing it, and then on the other end, if we're saying that it's going to be, these health, like public systems or something, we're accountable to make sure that those systems work, and that they are not gonna bankrupt and like fall short, like something. It's got to be sustainable, and those are legitimate critiques, like, and so
that's excellent. And I have hit the wall, but
yeah.
like Norway, they have a state church, so they all give 2%, and their taxes are 1%. I don't know what but the fallback is now they have a say, they rule sometimes versus, and so you just gotta. And I'm getting into more details. But
well, and I think it'd be a fun conversation to have. Like, how do we care for the widow and orphan? And we both want to, like we could also have the conversation of like social mobility. How do we provide a society where if you work hard, you can be provided with better opportunity? Like, both of those things seem like values that we would both agree on. And starting from that place, I think it's like we always ought to start there instead of the end isms, and comparing them.
That's excellent, man. And I think Danny over here has written a big sign that says Jed for president, Bob for vice president. We're in.
Yeah.
The two party. We are to others.
I'm only like 6 years away from being old enough to actually run for president. So,
well, I'll take a nap till then.
That sounds good. No, I'm just saying I'm feeling old.
But. No, you're young, man. You're young. So it was a wonderful talk, man. We got some good comments here. So you might think, if you get a chance earlier, we get on and we respond to the comments,
Yeah, sounds great. And as of right now, I'll start working on our 2028 campaign of universal ice cream.
That's it.
Right.
That'll get 1 million hits.
Yeah, sure.
Love everybody.
See ya.
Thank you, everybody. What'd you think?
Good.
Really good, huh?
Yeah.
So he's looking at me and he's saying I'm a plumb line for him. So this is the things that are out there. Well, the one thing they said
just ended fairly substantial. I mean,
Oh, okay. So all your phone calls are responded to, just did not respond to that part of Indiana. Is that
Pittsburgh wasn't that good. Kevin?
Yeah, their defense played tough, and Roethlisberger did a good job.
That last pass I just saw, he nailed it.
Yeah.
So, when I look at these quarterbacks,
I mean, the game looked pretty close, call it like the first half. But,
did they stop Saquon Barkley much?
I couldn't tell you.
Jenkins to the comments. He said Hillary and Harvard might go on the Hillary's okay. Oh, we got another game coming up.
Yeah, with the, what's his name, Drew,
Our quarterback.
yeah.
So, what was last quarter, Giants?
All right, good night.
Good night, Dan. Thank you for saying. So, what was that? What's that? On there.
What's that?
Yeah, on there.
It was just some Facebook thing that came up with it.
Yeah, that was loud. It was fine. That's no big deal. Don't you go.
I cleaned it up.
So, all right, tomorrow we'll go.
Yeah, I'll come over here with my stuff.
We'll do a little, those questions. So it won't be hard. Just, I wrote this morning. Just get going. So I wrote mine a little bit. And I feel better now, you know. Did you?
1:30 was, that's not long. Gosh, it's
That's awesome. Tomorrow I'm supposed to go to the doctor at 3. The pain doctor takes me this long, so I really could go. Yeah, we'll go. All right, bless you. So do you hear some of it in there?
Yeah. Can't measure what.
They think Hillary's all right. He said, well, I don't know. Hillary's not right. How do we feel? They're pretty pro Hillary.
Well, you gotta understand the emotions that Hillary sparks on the, call it the far political right, the political right, is the same thing that Trump, just, in other words, that same animosity is the same thing that, they're feeling about Trump. It's like, I can't believe anybody would, especially a Christian or something, that says that they,
But she's been very clearly found out to be a lot of the other things, I mean, the facts are different. A little bit different.
well, when you say she's been found to do illegal things, not really. She hasn't been tried or anything else. Not as shady stuff in terms of how do you explain the server getting wiped and the phones are all smashed with hammers and all that kind of junk. Yeah, it's it's bad.
I just listen to Trey Galley a lot. I see where he's going. Well, I don't know about what I come over here is him. Stated the facts. This is Denver.
Yeah.
What about the movie fans? Like those things to another. Understood on crack. Reparations for blacks.
What's that?
Yeah, the reparations for blacks. Get my parents.
He got injured. Yeah, I think so. That's right.